I lost everything in one moment. My brother Thomas, my girlfriend Jessica, and the future I had planned. We grew up inseparable in suburban Boston, sharing baseball games and standing up for each other. Then I caught them together in his apartment, destroying the trust I never thought could break. 8 years later, living across the country in Seattle with my career rebuilt and a new love, I received that envelope. The invitation to their wedding, as if the betrayal never happened. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe to join me on this journey of betrayal, boundaries, and finding peace. Growing up in suburban Boston, Thomas and I were more than just brothers. Despite being 3 years younger, he was my best friend, my constant companion. Our parents worked long hours at their accounting firm, so we learned to rely on each other early. I still remember teaching him how to throw a baseball in our backyard, spending hours perfecting his swing until dusk forced us inside. When bullies targeted him in elementary school, I was always there, standing between him and trouble, earning myself more than a few bruises in the process. Even as teenagers, when most siblings drift apart, we remained close. We spent weekends battling in video games, Thomas always choosing Mario while I remained loyal to Luigi. Our parents often commented on how unusual our bond was, how lucky they were to have sons who actually liked each other. When I left for Boston University, Thomas would take the bus to visit every other weekend, sleeping on my dorm room floor just to hang out like old times. During my sophomore year at BU, I met Jessica at a party hosted by my roommate. She was studying photography with chestnut hair that caught the light and a laugh that made everyone around her smile. That night we talked until sunrise, about everything from childhood memories to future dreams. I remember walking her back to her dorm as the morning light painted the buildings golden, knowing something special had just begun. Jessica was everything I had ever hoped for in a partner. Intelligent, creative, and with a sense of adventure that pulled me out of my comfort zone. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant near campus where she insisted we try the most unusual items on the menu. By our third date, hiking through Blue Hills Reservation, taking photos of the autumn leaves, I knew I was falling in love. The first time I brought Jessica home for Thanksgiving, Thomas seemed unusually quiet. I attributed it to his natural shyness, the awkwardness of meeting someone new. But by Christmas they were exchanging inside jokes and arguing good-naturedly about movie endings. She fit into our family, perfectly charming my parents with thoughtful gifts and offering to help with dinner preparation. Thomas eventually warmed up, especially when Jessica showed genuine interest in his drawings and encouraged his artistic talent. The next 3 years were the happiest of my life. After graduating, Jessica and I found a small apartment in Cambridge. She started building her photography portfolio while working at a gallery, and I landed an entry-level position at a software company. Every weekend brought a new adventure, exploring New England together, filling our apartment walls with her photos of our trips. We talked about marriage, children, buying a house in the suburbs. I started saving for an engagement ring, setting aside a portion of each paycheck for 6 months, until I had enough for the diamond I knew she would love. Meanwhile, Thomas struggled to find his path. He dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming it was not challenging him creatively. He bounced between retail jobs, never lasting more than a few months at each. Our parents worried, but I defended him, insisting he just needed time to find his passion. When he complained about not having friends, I introduced him to mine, making sure to include him in our game nights and cookouts. Jessica was especially kind to him, suggesting art classes he might enjoy and helping him build a portfolio. I never imagined my support would lead to the greatest betrayal of my life. The changes were subtle at first. Jessica began working late, more frequently, her texts becoming shorter and less frequent. Thomas suddenly had plans when I suggested hanging out, vague excuses about art projects or new friends. I was happy he seemed to be finding his way, too preoccupied with work stress and planning my proposal to notice the warning signs. Our third anniversary was approaching, and I planned a special evening. I planned and blank. I had the ring hidden in my desk drawer at work reservations at the restaurant, where we had our first date and a speech practiced to perfection. That morning, Jessica seemed distracted, mentioning a last-minute photography assignment she needed to complete before our dinner. I told her not to worry, that I would pick her up at 7, kissing her goodbye before heading to work. Excited and unable to focus, I decided to leave early and surprise her. I stopped for roses, her favorite chocolate, thinking how perfect the day would be. When I turned onto our street and saw her car missing, I assumed she was still out working. But something made me drive past our apartment toward Thomas's place across town. Maybe it was intuition or the culmination of small suspicions I had been ignoring. When I spotted her blue Honda parked outside his building, my stomach dropped. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. The roses wilting in the passenger seat, telling myself there must be an innocent explanation. Maybe she was helping him with another art project. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. The possibilities grew increasingly desperate as I gathered the courage to go upstairs. The door to his apartment was unlocked. I heard her laugh before I saw them, that familiar sound, now like a knife to my chest. They were on his couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, wine glasses on the coffee table. The intimacy of the scene left no doubt about what had been happening. When they finally noticed me standing there, the shock on their faces confirmed everything. Jessica jumped up, her face pale. Thomas looked like he might be sick. For a moment, none of us spoke, the only sound, the stupid cooking show playing on the television. "Gordon, this is not what it looks like," Jessica started, but her voice trailed off because we all knew exactly what it was. Thomas stood up, reaching toward me. "Bro, I can explain. We were just talking, and things got out of hand. It was a mistake." My vision blurred with rage and hurt. The roses fell from my hand as I lunged at Thomas, tackling him over the coffee table. Years of brotherly wrestling matches were forgotten as I threw a real punch for the first time in my life, connecting with his jaw. Jessica screamed, trying to pull me off him. I pushed her away, my voice breaking as I asked how long. The truth spilled out between Thomas's apologies and Jessica's tears. 6 months. 6 months of sneaking around while I planned our future. 6 months of lies every time she said she was working late or he claimed to be at an art class. The betrayal was not a mistake or a moment of weakness, but a calculated deception maintained by the two people I trusted most. I left them there, ignoring their pleas to talk it through, to work it out. That night I stayed at a hotel, turning off my phone after the 20th call from Jessica. The next morning I returned to our apartment only when I knew she would be at work, packing essential items and leaving my key on the counter. The confrontation with Thomas came 3 days later, after dozens of ignored messages. I agreed to meet him at a park neutral ground where I would not be tempted to destroy his possessions. He arrived with a black eye, looking like he had not slept. The conversation revealed even more painful truths. Thomas admitted to always being jealous of me, of the ease with which I made friends and achieved goals. He claimed Jessica had been unhappy for months, but was afraid to tell me. Each excuse cut deeper, especially when he suggested that their connection was somehow more authentic, more artistic than what Jessica and I had shared. "She understands my creative side in ways you never could," he said, as if that justified the betrayal. When our parents learned what happened, they tried to mediate to preserve family harmony. To my shock, they suggested I find a way to forgive, citing blood ties and the importance of family. Their reaction felt like another betrayal, minimizing my pain in favor of keeping peace. "He is still your brother," my father said during a tense dinner at their house. "People make mistakes." "This was not a mistake," I replied. "This was a choice they made every day for 6 months. When they insisted I would need to see Thomas at family gatherings to eventually make peace for the sake of family unity, I made the hardest decision of my life. I told them they would have to choose. They could have a relationship with both of us separately, but I would not attend any event where Thomas was present. Then I applied for a transfer to my company's Seattle office, needing distance from the places that now held only painful memories. The first year in Seattle was the darkest period of my life. I lived in a sparsely furnished apartment, focusing only on work during the day and falling into exhausted sleep at night. Weekends stretched endlessly with no friends or family to fill the hours. The engagement ring sat in my sock drawer, a reminder of broken dreams I could not bring myself to return or sell. My parents called weekly, their updates inevitably including news of Thomas and Jessica continuing their relationship, moving in together as if rubbing salt in my wounds. I started screening their calls, limiting conversation to safe topics like weather and work. When they mentioned possibly visiting for Christmas, I invented a work conflict, not ready to face them in person. The turning point came when a coworker invited me to join a hiking group. Initially, I declined, but after another lonely weekend, I reluctantly agreed. The group met early on a Saturday, 10 strangers setting out on a trail overlooking Puget Sound. For 6 hours, I focused only on the path ahead, the burn in my muscles, the rhythm of my breathing. For the first time since the betrayal, my mind was quiet. I returned every weekend, gradually getting to know the others in the group. There was no pressure to share personal stories, just companionable silence on difficult ascents and casual conversation during breaks. Through them, I started to build a network in Seattle, accepting invitations to dinners and outdoor concerts. After 6 months, I finally started therapy, initially just to address the insomnia that plagued me, but eventually dealing with the deeper wounds of betrayal. My therapist helped me understand that cutting ties with Thomas had been necessary for my healing, that forgiveness did not require reconciliation. She encouraged me to date when I felt ready, to not allow one betrayal to close me off from future connections. Meanwhile, my career flourished. The distance from distractions allowed me to focus completely on work, earning a promotion to senior developer within 18 months. I bought a small house near Lake Washington, gradually filling it with furniture that reflected my new life. I took cooking classes, joined a recreational softball league, started building an identity separate from the one that had been shattered. 3 years after moving to Seattle, I received the news that Thomas and Jessica had broken up. My mother shared this during one of our now monthly calls, her voice careful, gauging my reaction. To my surprise, I felt nothing beyond mild curiosity about the circumstances. They wanted different things, was all she said, and I did not press for details. By then, I had started dating again. Cautious encounters with women I met through friends or activities. Trust came slowly with each relationship, a careful exercise in vulnerability. Some ended when I could not open up fully. Others when compatibility issues arose. But each taught me something about myself and what I wanted in a partner. 4 years after arriving in Seattle, I met Sophia at a photography exhibition. She was the curator, passionate about supporting local artists with a directness that was refreshing after years of tiptoeing around emotional landmines. Our conversation that evening about the intersection of technology and art led to coffee the next day, then dinner the following week. Sophia knew about Thomas and Jessica from the beginning. I told her on our 3rd date, wanting transparency where there had once been secrets. Her response was compassionate without pity, angry on my behalf without judgment. With her, I found the security to fully trust again, to plan a future without fear of betrayal. 5 years after the devastating discovery, I finally felt healed. Sophia and I moved in together, blending our lives with surprising ease. My relationship with my parents had stabilized into regular visits when they came to Seattle, careful avoidance of difficult topics, and growing acceptance of my boundaries regarding Thomas. I had even agreed to send him a birthday card the previous year, a small acknowledgement of our shared history without reopening wounds. When I proposed to Sophia on a mountain trail overlooking the city where I had rebuilt my life, the moment was untainted by past heartbreak. Her yes was the beginning of a new chapter, one I had written on my terms. And then the invitation arrived. The envelope was cream-colored and heavy, my name and address written in unfamiliar calligraphy. For a moment I thought it was a client invitation, or perhaps something from Sophia's gallery. When I saw the return address with Thomas's name, I nearly threw it away unopened. Curiosity won. Inside was an ornate wedding invitation, gold-embossed letters announcing the upcoming marriage of Thomas Alexander Pierce and Jessica Marie Callahan. My hands shook as I read the names, the date set for 6 months in the future, the location, a vineyard outside Boston. Sophia found me at the kitchen table, still staring at the invitation, an hour later. She read it over my shoulder, her hand squeezing mine in silent support. When I finally looked up, her eyes were filled with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked simply. I was not sure how to answer. The shock was giving way to anger, not at the relationship which I had long accepted continued after I left Boston, but at the audacity of the invitation. What response did they expect? "Congratulations. Attendance forgiveness served with wedding cake." Attached to the invitation was a handwritten note from Thomas, his familiar scrawl bringing back memories of shopping lists on our refrigerator, and birthday cards signed by both brothers. "Gordon, I know this is unexpected and perhaps unwelcome. Jessica and I broke up 3 years ago but reconnected last year through a mutual friend. Things are different now. We have both grown and changed. I understand if you cannot attend, but I hope this might be an opportunity for healing. I miss my brother. Call me if you want to talk." He included his phone number as if I might not still have it memorized despite not dialing it in 8 years. My parents called that evening, clearly having coordinated with Thomas. They spoke of family healing, of life being too short for permanent estrangement, of this being a chance to move forward. My father suggested I bring Sophia, as if her presence would somehow buffer the absurdity of watching my brother marry the woman I had once planned to make my wife. Sleep eluded me that night and the next as I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to ignore the invitation completely, to continue the peaceful life I had built without the complications of that relationship. Another part was curious about what possible explanation Thomas could offer for thinking this invitation appropriate. I shared the situation with my closest Seattle friends during our weekly dinner. Jake, always protective, suggested I attend with Sophia on my arm, showing them how well I had moved on. Maria thought I should send a polite decline without explanation. Sam, who had experienced his own family estrangement, reminded me that reconciliation was possible without condoning past behavior. "The question is not what they deserve," he said. "It is what brings you peace." After a week of deliberation and a particularly insightful therapy session, I wrote a letter to Thomas. Not an acceptance or declination, but an opening. I explained that I had built a good life in Seattle, that I was engaged to a wonderful woman that I had found healing. I told him that while I had no interest in attending his wedding, I was willing to consider rebuilding some form of brotherly relationship separate from his connection to Jessica. But I needed to understand his thinking, his perspective on the past, and how we might create a different future. I proposed a meeting. If he was serious about reconciliation, he could come to Seattle, neutral territory, where I felt secure and established. To my surprise, he agreed immediately, booking a flight for the following weekend. 8 years after I walked away from my brother, we sat across from each other at a coffee shop near Pike Place Market. He looked both familiar and strange, his hair shorter, his face more mature, a small scar above his right eyebrow that had not been there before. We exchanged awkward pleasantries about the weather, his flight, my recommendation for the best coffee. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning since I opened the invitation. "Why did you think I would want to attend your wedding to Jessica?" Thomas sighed, his fingers fidgeting with a sugar packet. "I know how it must look to you. Believe me, I spent weeks debating whether to send that invitation. Jessica thought I was crazy to even consider it." He explained that after their breakup, they had lost contact completely. He moved to New York, went back to school for graphic design, started therapy to deal with his issues of jealousy and insecurity. Jessica stayed in Boston building her photography business. They reconnected by chance at a gallery opening where her work was being shown. "We were different people," he said. "The relationship we have now is nothing like what happened before. We spent a year just rebuilding trust as friends before anything romantic developed." I listened without interrupting, noting the sincerity in his voice, the lack of defensive justification I had expected. He spoke of years of regret, of the shame that followed him, even into new relationships, of eventually understanding the depth of his betrayal. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. I just want you to know that I understand now what we did. It was unforgivable. But I have spent 8 years trying to become someone who would never do something like that again. When he finished speaking, I shared my journey, the painful rebuilding, the lessons learned about self-respect and boundaries. I made it clear that while I appreciated his growth, I had no interest in having Jessica in my life in any capacity. If we were to attempt any kind of relationship, it would need to be separate from her, perhaps meeting when he visited our parents' occasional phone calls. I will not attend your wedding, I said firmly. That is a boundary I need to maintain for my own well-being. But I am willing to work toward a relationship where we can at least be in the same room at family events without tension. Thomas accepted these terms without argument, understanding that this was more than he had reason to expect. We parted with an awkward handshake, neither ready for a brotherly embrace, but with a tentative plan to speak monthly. When the wedding date arrived, I sent a simple card with a modest gift certificate, a gesture of goodwill without endorsement. Instead of traveling to Boston for the ceremony, Sophia and I invited my parents to Seattle the following weekend. A separate celebration of family that maintained my boundaries, while acknowledging the importance of those relationships. The healing process has been gradual, with occasional setbacks and difficult conversations. Thomas and I speak every few weeks. Now, our discussions carefully avoiding certain topics, but slowly rebuilding a version of brotherhood different from but perhaps stronger than what we had before. Through this journey, I have learned that forgiveness does not mean erasing boundaries or pretending betrayal never happened. It means freeing yourself from the burden of anger while still protecting your heart. It means rebuilding on your terms, not according to others' expectations of family obligation. The most valuable lesson has been understanding that my worth is not determined by others' treatment of me, but by the life I choose to build from the pieces. The betrayal shaped me, but it does not define me. My story continued beyond that painful chapter, leading to a stronger sense of self, a deeper capacity for love with Sophia, and eventually a more honest relationship with my brother. If you have experienced betrayal by someone close to you, remember that healing is not linear and there is no single right way to rebuild. What boundaries have you set to protect yourself while healing from betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button to support more content about overcoming life's challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and self-discovery. Remember, you deserve relationships built on respect and trust, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from those that are not.